Hey guys, I'm so excited that we're starting our fantasy writing unit this week. I know we've talked a couple of days about it, but this is really one of the best parts, I think. Um, you're starting to build your world. And as we talked about in fantasy, world building really is everything. And that's one of the reasons why, when you look at the different kinds of books that have a series, fantasy tends to have a series or longer series like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Maze Runner, Divergent, even The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Wrinkle in Time. Those are all part of a series, the Gregor books, because once an author has devoted that much time to building a world, it makes sense to just keep building on top of that instead of starting over. And once you get a reader understanding and engaged in your world, it's nice to keep going with it. And so world building really is very important to writing your fantasy story. So we're actually going to do a lot of that this week and not really start writing our story for a while. And so this is a sheet that you're going to use to help you, and I'll be checking it this week and then giving it back to you. The other thing you're going to be doing today, you aren't going to turn in, but you're responsible for keeping because it's due at the end of the unit, and I'll explain more about that later. So today for writing, you're going to be filling this sheet out. And like I said, I am going to check it. So you do need to make sure that you do it, and you do need to make sure that you do it well. And then later on in the unit, you could always add to it if you wanted to. So when I say, what does it look like, I want you to think about when it's supposed to take place. A lot of times, your fantasy story is going to take place in two parts, sometimes in two different time periods, sometimes not. But either way, you can do a when. If you think about Girl Giant and the Monkey King, it has two main settings. It has her ordinary life in Georgia, and then it has the heavens. You wouldn't say that the setting is the school, her house, the neighborhood, the soccer field. I mean, you can think about all of those things and describe them, but when you're thinking about the overall settings of that story, it's regular Georgia and then the heavens. And then there are little settings within that. So you can always go deeper, but you would need to make sure that you at least describe the major setting, the overarching setting. So when does it take place? Um, where? If you have a realistic location and then you have a fantasy location, maybe you divide this into a T-chart and you do one side says one thing, one side says the other. But for sure, you want to try to explain both. Where? If it's an actual place like Indianapolis, Indiana, then you should say that. If it's a made up city like Justicia in Sidekick that seems like a normal city, you can say that. So you can divide your paper into realistic place and then fantasy place. Also, while you're thinking about it, you want to give, you want to describe what it looks like. You want to describe sounds. You want to describe smells. Okay. You can describe the emotions that someone would have when they walk in there, and you know what I mean by that. Because if you're thinking about a Halloween slasher movie, when someone walks into a room and it's creepy, you feel creepy. You feel like the little hairs on your arm standing up. So you can talk about how a place looks like by emotion, right? You can say it feels like nobody's been here for years. That's an emotion, but it definitely goes along with what it looks like. So you can think about these things. This is a great opportunity to use your figurative language to describe your location. All right. The next thing is, who are the characters that live there? My suggestion would be to think of your main characters and then some qualities about them, some basic qualities. You don't need to go into a lot of detail here because you're going to do that later. So maybe if I was the author of Girl Giant and the Monkey King, maybe I would say Tom and I would say girl, main character. And maybe if I said Kathy, girl at the school, right? I'm not looking for a huge description. I'm just saying, like, what role are they going to play in your story? So I would say you need to think of at least 4 people that are going to be in your story, and then who are they in the story? Like I said, you don't have to go in and say, well, she's 13 and she's got a ponytail and she's strong. You don't have to do any of that. I just need you to talk about what their role in the story is. And then the last one, what kind of magic is found there? How is it different from the real world? If you're saying to yourself, wait, Miss F, my story doesn't have magic, this is where I explain to you that your story has to have a magical element. When you're writing your own story for your own purposes, you can do it however you want, but you must have a magical component. Okay? Think about spells, think about laws of physics, meaning does gravity not work there? Are you stepping on clouds? What's happening there? Is there a different language? What is magical about your place? And again, this is where I tell you, you have to have a magical component. Does someone have powers? What is it that's different? So today's the day where you spend some time really thinking about creating your world. And then what you're going to do is on the back, it says to do it on the back. I would rather you didn't do it on the back. I would rather you did it on a regular piece of paper. So on this regular piece of paper that I'm going to send home with you, you have a choice. You can either draw a picture of what you think it looks like a scene that might serve as a major starting point in your story, or you can draw a map of what you think your whole fantasy land looks like. Those are your two choices. Now, like I said, this sheet you're turning in to me to check, and then I'm going to give it back to you. This picture, you're going to be using it to share during our fantasy celebration. It's part of the assignment, and you're going to need a little folder for all of your fantasy stuff. So if you're at home and you've got folders, maybe today's the day you pull one out. And so you're going to need to keep this picture. And you can continue to add to it if you don't finish it today. But since you're home, it's probably a good idea to finish it today. So your two assignments are to give some thought and complete your magical world sheet, and then do either a picture or a scene that you know is going to happen in your book, or you can do a map. And make sure you bring both of these things back to school tomorrow.